3 years ago now, I wrote a script for an unmade video that was essentially me just screaming about how much I love Enter the Gungeon. Having not determined a style or really a point to it, the script meandered from educational to passionate. I touched on the origin of the term roguelike and how it differed from roguelite, and the script could have been a video about the artificial categorization and labeling that we as humans do in order to feel safe within this great big uncategorizable world of ours. But it didn't turn into that. I also talked a bit about how the game's pixel art touched on a particular Game Boy-esque nostalgia for me, and how after 200 hours of playing the game, I was still discovering delightfully hidden gems within the art style, like how the Reaper's scythe is actually a gun, and how everything is actually a gun, and how instead of being terrifying or evocative of a particular dude bro emotion, the omnipresent weaponry came across as charming.
So cute.
But the script didn't turn into that analysis either. Instead, the script devolved away from my detached logos and unadulterated passion, and it turned strangely morose. The script talks about a strong and powerful existentialism combined with a small measure of hope. It's an emotion that, after having graduated college, experienced the emotional weight of a global pandemic, and landed a soul-sucking office job where I wondered at the end of each day if I actually achieved literally anything or if I had just been pushing pencils, I feel so much more acutely now. I talked about the game's difficulty. I am, frankly, paralyzed by the prospect of living in the world. Not always, fortunately. I am still able to function somewhat normally on a day-to-day basis, and I have a wonderful core family that supports me when I'm down, and a smattering of friends that mean a lot to me. But despite all that, occasionally, if not frequently, when I look out into the big wide world outside of my childhood home, I'm met with a view of nothing but pitfalls, upcoming failures, and a world that seems increasingly anathema to allowing for growth and change, meaning that any failures I do inevitably commit will be seen by the omniscient eye of Sauron that the internet holds en masse, and I will be judged harshly by it. It's like I'm feeling imposter syndrome about just being a human in general. Like it's as if I'm not good enough to even exist within society, that people will see through my facade and know that I'm a scared kid that hasn't the foggiest notion of how to do anything at all. The fear I so often feel ropes off wide swaths of opportunity and labels it clearly in big red letters N-O. No, you can't live there. You won't be able to make rent. No, if you get that job, you'll be even more miserable than you are now. No, if you date that person, it'll only end with both of you sad. Fear walks me down its twisted hypotheticals in a rather effective effort to shut down my dreams. Fear tries to make me not even try things in the first place. Fear makes my world small. But it's not like I've given up, not even remotely. I've slowed, certainly, and sometimes I feel like I'm being crushed by the overwhelming weight of a hopeless and futile struggle waiting for me every day for the next however many years. But I don't feel like that all the time. In fact, lately, at least, the way I've been dealing with that crushing aura surrounding me when I get home from work is I go home and play Celeste. I have to be a little careful with my wording here because it really does seem masochistic from a certain point of view, but Celeste, despite being one of the hardest games I know of, is not a rage game. Far from it. I don't feel like Celeste is punishing me for my hubris of thinking I can beat it, or tempting me to engage in a nice little bout of self-flagellation like other games designed to make you hate yourself and shatter your controller. Celeste doesn't do that. Celeste simply challenges you. I mean, look at it. It's colorful and beautiful, and the soundtrack is plain gorgeous. The chibi icons are as cute as can be, and how could anyone be afraid of this game? Even my own oppressive shadow of fear can't seem to drape itself over the snow-covered mountain peaks of this game. Celeste, with its absolutely blatant theming and even more ridiculous difficulty curve at certain points, lulls me into a trance of effort. My thoughts wash away as I cause Madeline to die over and over and over again. I stop getting frustrated, I stop worrying, and what's left is just the sheer desire to beat the level. It's not escapism, it's a simulation. Difficult video games, especially games with that finely tuned level of spicy that's enough to make my nose drip but not so spicy that I can't taste my food, act not as escapism for me but as microcosmic examples of how to approach and overcome challenges. I may be too afraid to go on a road trip by myself, or make and publish a YouTube video, or send my manuscript to an agent in the off chance of it getting it picked up. But I'm certainly not afraid to play a video game. Celeste is genius. It's one of those media experiences that strikes you so deeply that you come away from it irrevocably changed. The lion's share of its story is told not through dialogue, but through the difficulty of the gameplay itself. You are told that Madeline has serious mental health problems and that her anxiety and shattered identity have driven her to climb this mountain and confront herself. You feel it by dying 300 times in one level, only to finally emerge triumphant. Rather than improving the character over the course of the game with new items or abilities like is traditional in video games, Celeste levels you up as the player. As Madeline conquers her fears throughout the game, you conquer the game's challenges set out for you. And then, after beating the game and its ridiculously difficult 2 hidden levels, when you go back to the first level, it's nothing. I can beat it in under 2 minutes. I'm not worried about the challenge of it anymore. I barely have to think while playing it. It's as if doing the hard thing, the hard way, has made it easier for me when I face similar challenges in the future. Enter the Gungeon, like Celeste, is also insanely difficult, delightfully charming, and one of the best games I've played in my entire life. Enter the Gungeon's difficulty curve, like Celeste's, is based not in randomness or increasingly difficult gameplay mechanics, though those are certainly part of the equation, but primarily, the greatest obstacle you face in Enter the Gungeon is yourself. The precise, finely tuned controls of this game make it so that almost every time you die, it feels fair. It's from your own mistakes and inadequacies. Once you've sunk a couple hundred hours into this game, you start to become really consistent. Even if you've only gotten C and D tier chests on the first floor of Gungeon and your items frankly suck, if you're still dodge rolling in the right places, conserving ammo for the boss, and just playing well, the game gives you an extra heart container. It rewards your effort rather than the randomness. Enter the Gungeon as a game doesn't really have a story, and yet it so does too. The premise of Gungeon is that there is a hidden temple in the far reaches of the galaxy that many have made pilgrimages to in search of the sacred gun that can kill the past. This gun, hidden deep within the recesses of the Gungeon, will shoot the person who fired it, take them back in time to their greatest regret, and allow them to change the past. You play as the Gungeoneers, people with dark pasts each and every one of them, trapped within the Gungeon, endlessly throwing their corpses at the wall in search for the opportunity to confront themselves and their failures. So, in summation, Enter the Gungeon is a stupidly difficult game that challenges the player instead of the character, has a story told more through gameplay than text, and is about confronting one's own shortcomings. Sound familiar? The difficulty of the games, the required fluency with their mechanics, and the steep learning curve all lead to a profound sense of accomplishment when the game itself is finally mastered or even just beaten. Fist pumps were had when I first killed the dragon, or a Gungeoneer's past. I mean, I got up and did a quick runabout when I finally beat the rat in Punch-Out. I celebrated when I got to the top of Mount Celeste, and when Madeline reconciled with her purple-haired anthropomorphization of her anxiety, and when I get a golden strawberry in that game, I'm positively euphoric. These games, they're so good with their difficulty, and their challenges, when I finally beat them, I feel so powerful, valuable, accomplished, worthy. I am 22. With luck, I have most of my life ahead of me, but I'm also in such a stage of acute uncertainty that I have to try hundreds of different possibilities to see what I like, what I'm good at, who I'm compatible with, what I'm compatible with, what fulfills me. And in my experience, the majority of the times you try something, you end up quitting on it, or it quits on you. And that's not a bad thing, because it means you can move on to try other things. But it is hard. It does hurt. And after a while, it can feel pretty hopeless. I recognize that I'm so incredibly fortunate to have these options and fears in the first place, but they still register in my mind as fears. I don't know what job I'll be working in 20 years' time. I don't know who I'll be married to, if I'm married at all. I don't know if the dreams I hold so near and dear to my identity now will have been let go and forgotten. To figure out all these things, I have to try, even when every fiber in my being screams at me to stay at home, under the covers, hiding. I have to try talking to that girl. I have to try for that job interview. I have to try letting people read my writing. I have to try making YouTube videos. I have to try using this philosophy. I have to try living by that possibility. And not only do I have to try these things, I have to commit to them as well. Because if all I ever do is start things and move on, then I'm not experienced, I'm a quitter. But actually committing effort to these things, these endless possibilities of who I can be, it's not just exhausting, it's also terrifying. And with each attempt, there's that much less time to try something else. The first version of this script was written when I was 19, 3 years ago. The list of things I talked about needing to try then are very different from the list I have now. And of the things I said I needed to try then, not many have I actually gone ahead and done so. There is simply not enough time to be so afraid of trying. I cannot let the size of my world be governed by fear. In Celeste and Enter the Gungeon, I've found something I can try at and not worry about. These games are hard. They are difficult. They take patience, practice, fluency, and eventually mastery. But they are delightful. There's no risk involved if I decide to give up on a run in these games. There's no pressure to commit to playing this game for at least a year to see if I like it or not. And yet, I choose to do so anyway, often for the challenge of it. In these two games, I reach their endings feeling victorious, feeling accomplished. It simulates the other side of where I'm at in life right now. Stability, mastery, success. But most of all, worthiness. I earned that victory. I earned it, me, through practice and not giving up. I've likely over-exaggerated the truth behind the pudding here, but at least in a small way, these games make me less afraid of the world. I can point to these ultimately meaningless pixels on a screen and say, hey, I got through that stupidly difficult challenge, didn't I? Maybe I'm made of tougher stuff after all. You yourself are your greatest limiter in these games, and you are in many aspects of life as well. And if I can overcome myself in these microcosms, then where else might success be for me? Hiding behind just a few hundred hours of trying and trying and trying. This video is inspired almost entirely by the style of Jacob Geller's works. He has an amazing method of writing about games that invokes the humanity of a medium ironically built with simulation as its foundation. He also uses really big words and doesn't shy away from unironic enthusiasm, which I really appreciate. You can check out one of his videos here, or if you like my stuff, click subscribe and like and all that jazz. I like using big words and being unironically enthusiastic too. Also, props to my pen pal Irene for giving me the phrase, "fear makes your world small." I taped that phrase to my wall as soon as I read it from her, and it has served me well.